Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. My name's James Copley. No Phil Smith today, no Jason Jones either, but I'm very happy to be joined by the BBC's Jeff Brown. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks, James. Yeah, good stuff.
Good. Am I still allowed to say the BBC's Jeff Brown? You're still involved, aren't you? You're still there.
Yeah, I'm hanging on in there by my fingertips. Yeah, I mean, I left full time at the end of last season, the end of May, but I still actually go in on a Monday, do a half shift just to help out with putting the Monday night team talk slot together. Because people used to often ask, "What do you do all day? You just like go on at 6 and read the news?" No, I'm physically edit the pictures and write scripts for them, and I'm still doing post match for Lucknow, so I'm trained up to use a camera as a video journalist, and I take the camera along. And ever since they dropped out of the Premier League, and we didn't automatically get all the interviews from Match of the Day, I've been going along and filming the post-match press conferences. So I'm still doing that. Keep me involved.
It feels to us, Jeff, that nothing's really changed because you're still at every Sunderland home game, so you're still around filming next to Simon O'Rourke, your colleague from ITV. So from our perspective, you've never left.
No, I'm still clinging to that press pass. That's the yeah. It's been good. I've enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't want to make a complete break. I wanted to do something different. I'd done, I'd been there. I'd worked 42 years and as a journalist, and I'd worked 21 years, so half my working life at the BBC. And it just seemed like a good time to leave when I had other things that I wanted to do.
Absolutely. And you've been enjoying those other things as well. Tell us about your play that you've got going on at the moment.
Okay, that's a very early plug. Thanks very much for this.
We'll do it again later. Don't worry.
Well, why not? You can sort of see it in the background. That's the so that was the first incarnation. The place called The Bench. It was on at the Customs House in South Shields in 2023. It's about the strapline is it's a moving tale of love, loss, and football, because they always say write about what you know. So it's a story of a black footballer born in Africa, raised in France, who comes over to play for a struggling Premier League team, and you probably guess which one that was when I started writing it in about 2017. And on a park bench, he meets. He spends a lot of time on the substitutes bench. You see what I'm doing here? And on a park bench, he meets a single mum who is on benefits, and they appear to be from completely different worlds. But she's a bit of a lost soul with no money, and he's a bit of a lost soul with a lot of money. And it got a great reception, which I must say wasn't all down to me. The cast were fantastic and are fantastic, and it ran for 6 shows over 4 nights at the Customs House. So I say September 23, and loads of people who saw it said you can't just let this be the end of it. It's got to go on. So it's taken me and Carol Weir, my producer, 18 months to put a tour together. But this is it. The Bench is we're starting rehearsals this week. I've just left them actually at the gala in Durham. So it starts at the gala in Durham on May the 22nd, and May the 22nd, and it runs for a month over across the whole of the northeast, and a couple of Cumbrian dates as well. So we're at places like, we go to the Exchange in North Shields, we go to Middlesbrough Town Hall, Bishop Auckland Town Hall, Washington Arts Centre, Queen's Hall in Hexham, Alnwick Playhouse, Live Theatre in Newcastle, which is a big one because that's where I did a playwriting course, and the Customs House in Shields. But it also comes to Monk Weymouth Academy, which is very close to my heart because that's where I went to school. And they've just had a major refurb. They've turned the old school hall into a community theatre with bleacher seating and proper movable stage. So Tuesday, June the 17th, I'm taking it back to the school hall where I hesitate to say starred. Once appeared in the sixth form review in about 1978, I think that was. Alongside Melanie Hill, who did actually go on to have a good acting career.
I was going to say, you've done all right between the pair of you, haven't you there, Jeff?
Yeah, she's pretty good going on casually. She's fantastic. Yeah.
And how do you go about booking tickets, Jeff? We know where it is, but how do we get there?
You can either go on the producer's website, which is carolw.co.uk, Productions. It's Carol with an E, so it's CAROLEW, carolwproductions.com. All the individual theatres we've got their own websites as well. So I think Monk Mount set up some a ticketing agency. So yeah, massively excited. And then the play actually is it's at heart it's about, it's a love story, but there's a football agent in it who light and shade, and drawing on experiences, as you well you'll know the same thing, and there's also an element of, especially after the Euro Championships final, 2021s, and the online abuse the three black guys took I was busy writing and rewriting it, and so it's got a hard edge to it as well about the sort of stuff that black players in particular have to put up with. So and actually, because of that, Show Racism the Red Card, which is football charity based in Newcastle, they've endorsed it. They're going to be represented at every show, and they have got together with the Gala Theatre in Durham, who've been superb, and produced an education pack, which is going out to schools. So using examples from the play to try and spread the anti-racism message. So, which is lovely. It was never the original intention of the play, but if it can have some, it was just meant to entertain people. But if it can have some wider community impact, then that's humbling, really. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll come on to the football in a minute as well, but I've loved the Northeast footballing heroes as well on BBC Sounds, Jeff. How was that? How was that to make? Because that sounds like a podcaster's wet dream. Really, it sounds great.
It was lovely, I have to say. I mean, they were all bar one I would consider to be mates, really. Am I mates with Alan Shearer? I don't know, but he knows me well enough. I've interviewed him.
We'll have to kick you off the podcast.
I've interviewed him often enough. But the others I would consider like really close mates: Brendan Foster, Steve Harmison, Stephen Miller, the Paralympian. Katie McLean, who was just, and what a lovely story. A lot of people wouldn't know she was a primary school. She's from South Shields originally, but she was a primary school teacher at Bexhill in Sunderland when she captained England to win England's women to win the Rugby Union World Cup for the first time in 20 years. And she said it was great going back to school and the kids like, "Oh, I saw you on telly, miss," and she'd come with a black eye and her nose all over. But it just. And she was lovely. She was lovely, Katie. The only one I didn't know really was Savannah Marshall.
I've interviewed her before. She's a good interview, actually, Savannah. She got better over the years.
Oh, so much, yeah. I mean, her nickname was and is the Silent Assassin because she was devastating in the ring, but out of it, you couldn't squeeze two words out of her. And but she has obviously grown and matured, and she was lovely and such a fascinating person to interview. So yeah, that was Jeff Brown's Sporting Greats on BBC Sounds. You can still listen, and I'm hoping there's going to be a second series later in the year. So yeah, I've not been idle since leaving Look North.
No, absolutely not. One of my favourite Jeff Brown moments that we simply have to talk about, I don't think I've even ever really discussed this with you, but would be the Paul Ince thing. those who aren't aware, Sunderland played Reading at the time under Tony Mowbray at home. I think we won 1-0 and Reading turned up. I think they had big Andy Carroll up front, didn't they? They were time wasting from minute one. There was no sort of discernible game plan. It was really shocking. Sunderland managed to edge the game, and afterwards, Paul Ince, who was the manager at the time, came into the press room, and Jeff, as he does, led the question as the TV reporter and asked what the game plan was in so many words, and expressed in no uncertain terms that you didn't really see a game plan, and Paul Ince disagreed with your assessment, and a back and forth ensued, to which I was completely stunned at, being a little bit of a younger journalist as well. I'd never really seen anything like that. But I must say, Paul Ince came back with both barrels, but Jeff Brown did not budge an inch, which was fantastic to see.
Yeah, it was a weird one. I mean, obviously any Sunderland fan who's watched the game since dropping out of the Premier League, the time wasting has got worse and worse as further you go down the leagues, and it's like so many teams, especially teams who in League One, the likes of Accrington and Fleetwood and people like that, who've never played at the stadium, like clearly turned up thinking we're going to leave here with something. And the time wasting used to really boil my blood. It still does. When it happens now, I try to look away. I try to read the programme.
Preston this season was also, wasn't it? And they got instant comeuppance, didn't they?
That was just ludicrous. But the Reading one, it just got worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, if you remember, Patrick Roberts nicked a goal from a mistake 5 minutes from the end. And suddenly, Paul Ince is running for the ball and tapping his watch. I can't believe this. And I wouldn't normally do it, but I was just boiling. And I just thought, I'm gonna ask you what. And if he'd said, because Reading were struggling at the time, if he
was under pressure, wasn't he?
He was under pressure. If he turned around and said, "Look, we've got a transfer embargo. We're really struggling. We're going to, hands up. We'll do anything we can to get a point, even if it means completely spoiling the game." But he would not have it. He completely wouldn't have it, and he took it really personally. And I thought, actually, you know what? I'm not going to let you get away with this. A lot of people came after him and said, "Oh, well done." I said, "Yeah, there's 3 rows of journalists between me and him." So we're going to get there. And of course, the funniest thing was he went out, and about 30 seconds later, Tony Mowbray came in. And he said, "Who's been upsetting Ince?" So he'd obviously had word, and apparently this carried on in the director's room as well, in the boardroom as well. He was still moaning about it. And I was trying to say, look, people pay good money, and they want to, they want to see some sort of game. And again, the funny thing was, in years gone by, because obviously I started reporting in the 80s. In years gone by, people would have had a bit of a laugh at it. Maybe 1 or 2 might have alluded to it in a match report or something, but that would have probably been the end of it. So I literally got to the car park, got my car in the car park, put the camera away, and my phone's going bing, 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 and it's all over Twitter. And within about quarter of an hour, the transcript's there, and everyone's analysing it. And then obviously we ended up putting the film out as well, because I was filming it at the same time. And the nice thing was, I mean, obviously, as you do online, you get 1 or 2 saying, "Oh, who's he trying to make a name for himself?" But and I wasn't genuinely. I just felt for the fans who had to sit through that. And the nice thing was that the vast majority of people said, "Thank you for saying what you did," including the Reading fans. The Reading fans were saying, "We travel all that way. The football's terrible, and he's given us that." And their radio guy got a lot of grief because they were saying, "Why don't you ask these sort of questions?"
Oh God!
But I fell for him, because that's difficult when you've got to.
Well, he's got to have that. He's got to have that relationship, hasn't he?
Yeah, of course you have. And he did. Their local BBC guy. The next week, I saw something online, and that he had a go. Ince hadn't been very happy, and I think within about 2 or 3 weeks,
he was gone pretty quick, wasn't he? Yeah, maybe you were the catalyst, Jeff. I thought that there was a moment, actually. You mentioned Paul Ince going out and Mowbray coming back in. There was a moment just before that happened that Nick Barnes, the room went silent, and Nick Barnes turned around and went, "What did Paul Ince ever do to you, Jeff?" Which everybody had a good laugh. And I thought the report, it was bizarre actually to be reporting on something that had happened in the press conference with a fellow journalist. It was very strange. I remember as it was unfurling, thinking like, can I write anything about this? Like, this seems a bit like too behind the scenes. I don't think I should say anything about this really. But as you mentioned, I don't think anybody really from our end did, but it was the Reading papers that got hold of it. And then before you know it was just everywhere. And as you say, when it catches fire on the internet, it doesn't show any signs of stopping quickly, does it?
No, and it's out there forever. It's it was crazy. And the other nice thing was a couple of, I can understand people not wanting to get involved, because it's I've seen it before. I remember being at a Newcastle press conference when Craig Hope, I think it was from the Daily Mail.
Oh, that is infamous. That is really infamous.
Was having a spat with Steve McLaren, I think it was, and he ends up shouting at Steve as McLaren's walking out the press conference. And we filmed it. We had it all, and we went back and said, "Do we use this?
Yeah.
Is it a bit all sort of, it's all a bit in-house?" But nice. There was a couple of the local guys came up afterwards and said, like, the next time I was at a press conference, and said, Sorry, I probably should have said something and stood up for you, but I was just so shocked that it was going on.
You were in the zone, Jeff. I don't think anybody was getting anywhere. I remember that game actually because it makes me think of the Preston one this season. It stands out for a couple of reasons. As we mentioned, the game was absolutely horrible, and you're not really supposed to celebrate in the press conference, and I generally don't because. Well, yeah, you're not really supposed to. But I remember standing up and giving it a fist pump and shouting out. And I don't think the Stadium of Light was as full as it usually is. It was a midweek game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I don't think the concourse was open. And Phil Smith, my colleague, who's a very brotherly figure, and he's only a year older than, but he's a sort of. He's a wise head on older shoulders, isn't he? He came up to me after the game and says, "Look, James, we can't celebrate goals like that." And I was like, "Yeah, sorry, Phil. I lost it for a second." He's like, "Yeah, no harm done. Don't worry. We've just got to remain professional." All that. Anyway,
it does happen.
Haven't spoken about it since to Phil, but come Preston at home with the time wasting. Romain Mundle's goal flies into the top right-hand corner. I look over my shoulder and Phil Smith is stood up fist bumping and shouting. And I looked at him and thought, do I say anything here? And I haven't since actually. So this will be a test if he listens to this. Like I'm still waiting to have the word with him about him standing up and celebrating.
It's funny, and nearly at that press conference, I thought, should I ask again? And actually, a guy from, I can't remember, was BBC Radio
because
Sheffield,
was it Paul Heckenbottom? It wasn't it?
It was Paul Heckenbottom, yeah. And someone from Radio Sheffield led off as they do and asked him all about it. And he blamed the ref. He's blamed the ref and the lines. I'm like, what? You are kidding. And I thought about it and I thought, nah, I can't. He's answered it. He's not going to give any other answer than this. So, and of course, all that's now not going to happen again. I'm not going to be in that position again because for the last 6 years, I was saying I've been filming all the post-match press conferences as part of the press conference, but just from the last couple of games, in anticipation, fingers crossed,
we've been shunted around
the Premier League. We are now going to get separate interviews, and we don't get to speak to the opposition manager. We get Regis Lebris and a player because they're trying to give them some sort of media training should they get into the Premier League. Because, as you know, the chance to get to speak to players over the last few years has been minimal.
Seldom. Yeah.
And they're suddenly realising that in the Premier League you've got to speak to the cameras, and these guys need a bit of practice. So I'm sort of. Am I disappointed? Not really that I don't have to listen to any away managers making excuses anymore.
What would be your other sort of press conference highlights in the job? I think one of mine actually this season, and I couldn't believe he was saying it, but was when Mark Robbins brought Stoke up here in the FA Cup, and he just went off it about the attendances. And sometimes, if the opposition manager's been in after or before Lebris, your mind's elsewhere, isn't it? You're sort of just like listening on the periphery, and I was typing something up, and I could hear him in the background, and I thought, is he really just said that? And I had to go back, I had to listen to the tape a couple of times when I was transcribing it, and I was like, he has just said that. That's quite a strong line. That was quite memorable for me. Those that don't remember, he had to go at the attendance and questioned where the fans were, and it was quite
and the whole history of the FA Cup. And
exactly. And he had a point to a degree, but there was other factors. I think it was -3 on the day or something, wasn't it? It was really cool. But what would be your memorable sort of press conference moments or spats down the years?
Wow. I suppose managers' press conference, like the arrival press conferences. Roy Keane had to be one of the best. Where you're thinking, wow, what is this guy gonna come out with? And he's sitting next to Niall Quinn. They hate each other, don't they?
Yeah.
I've still got the notebook because I'll always do it for telly. I was making notes so I knew where I could, which were the best clips to. Instead of having to listen to the whole thing, I just spool through it. And typical Roy just said, "Yeah, it's all sorted now. Yeah, that was years ago. That was," and he just brushed it all off as he did. And I got a 1-to-1 with him down on the touchline afterwards. And I said to him, I have to say, Roy, you come across a lot different to what I thought. And he said, I'm not as bad as you think, And then and he was good. He was good for us all the time. Although you go to press conferences, and when he had that, he seemed to be able to grow this big bushy beard
Yeah,
overnight.
yeah.
And if he had the beard on, you thought, he's in a bad mood. But no, he was good. That was one of the ones I really look forward to. One of the and I do also remember the Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven one.
Oh,
That
the
one
first
stands.
ever one. Yeah.
That one's their first ever one because I got to ask the first question because they kicked off with TV. And at the time, you remember the club was in absolute free fall and a mess. And who were these guys? And
not only that, but they were doing interviews left, right, and centre, weren't they? There were
absolutely, they were everywhere.
Ad nauseum.
Yeah. But for the first official one, the first question at the press conference I got to ask him was, why Sunderland? And I meant it like generally. Have you not seen the state of this club? And the look on his face, it clearly was obvious that he didn't have a clue what he was getting into. He just said, well, why not? It's a fantastic club. And I'm sitting there thinking, you haven't done due diligence, have you? You haven't really seen you can't feel the vitriol that's around the place. And and I remember coming away thinking, you're going to go one or the way. If it goes well, you are going to be astounded at the love and the passion and the support of these fans if things go well. If it goes badly, you are going to be absolutely like, what is this?
And he really fed off that love and support initially, didn't he? Before it turned sour.
Yeah, a bit like Mike Ashley. Mike Ashley at Newcastle. I was talking about this with a mate the other day. Mike Ashley comes, he's the big saviour, he's in the crowd with his shirt and drinking his pint, and then within a few weeks he didn't even go to the game. We're a passionate lot up here.
The Alex Neil one when he did a bunk to Stoke a couple hours before the game, were you around for that one?
I was, yeah.
I mean, I missed that one actually. My colleague Joe at the time, he went to that one, but that must have been a bizarre situation. Turning up thinking you're going to speak to a manager and suddenly he's nowhere to be seen.
No, that was disappointing. I still think that he missed a trick, and the club.
100%,
well, obviously, because
100%.
he just. I mean, he was a funny bloke. It took you time to get to like him because he was always like a little bit. What's that you saying? A bit combative and a bit in your face. And but when you got to know him, you thought actually he's straight and he knows what he wants. And I think he got what the club was about. Like Tony Mowbray, obviously, but Tony would anyway because he's from the northeast. But Alex Neil just got it, and I was really disappointed when he left. And he thought, really, you want to go to Stoke? Is that it? I know it's loads more money, and it was closer to his home. He was still living over that side. But and then when he came back the first time, and I think they won 5-1, didn't they?
5-1, yeah.
And I tried to get it, and he said, I don't know why the fans, are so nasty to me. And I said, well, because you never really explained. Nobody explained why you went. And he just said, well, I don't want to get into that. I don't want to name names. But clearly he, fell out with Kyril, felt he didn't get a good enough reward or big enough contract for taking the club into Championship. So, but, he did do that. So I know, when we was there the other week, I think it was one anti Alex Neil chant, and I thought, well, yeah, I hope that eventually fades in the distance because he did get the club out of League One, which was such a horrible place to be.
It was, and I think that run as well towards the back end of League One does get forgotten a bit. It was he performed miracles really because I know that the club was second when. Were they second? Or I can't remember exactly where they were when Lee Johnson got sacked, but it was he got sacked after the Bolton game, didn't he? And then they lost a couple against, was it Doncaster and Cheltenham or something like that? So they dropped out of the division, but the run they actually went on to get in the playoffs was magnificent.
Yeah, absolutely.
That leads us nicely on, really, because we've talked for 24 minutes, but we haven't actually talked anything about current affairs. I mean, this is just us sort of reminiscing a little bit. But there is an outside shot, actually, that Sunderland could meet Alex Neil's Millwall in the playoffs. It goes down to the final day. They're in with a shout. If Bristol don't do it against Preston, you never know. You just never know.
No, but they've got Millwall. They've got Burnley, haven't they? And
They have,
Burnley
yeah.
on this massive unbeaten run. Just equaled the record number of clean sheets in any the top 4 divisions. 29, I think they've got.
Conceded 15 goals this season. It's ridiculous.
It is crazy, especially when you think, Sunderland should have beat them once, should have beaten them twice.
I know.
But yeah, who's it going to be? I mean, it's interesting that the Middlesbrough have got a chance. On paper, you would think, will Millwall get anything at Burnley? Probably not. Will Blackburn get anything at Sheffield United? They might do. Sheffield United are on a bit of a spiral, and then it's up to Middlesbrough to beat Coventry. So, I mean, in the minute, it looks like Sunderland and Bristol City, doesn't it? Which I think most fans, for all it was a draw and a defeat this season against Bristol City, I think most fans will be happy with that, rather than a derby with Middlesbrough or Coventry, who just nobody wants to play because they seem to have a bit of a curse on the team.
And in terms of Sunderland at the moment, which side of the fence are you sitting on? Because there's been a lot of talk about momentum versus getting players fit, and the momentum stakes are really dire at the moment because we haven't won in 5 and we've lost 4 in a row, which isn't ideal heading into a playoff campaign. But there's a lot of discourse about being able to turn on the tap when it comes to the playoffs. I don't tend to think it's that simple. However, I do accept that when there's jeopardy on a game, it may be a little different. But I wasn't too worried, but I was concerned by the manner of the Oxford performance, given the players that were on the pitch, to be honest.
Well, that's right. I think everyone expected, fair enough. Lebris was making changes. He wanted to give people a
7
run out.
changes.
Yeah, fine. He's the first team out. That's arguably even worse than previous games. Yeah, I can see the logic, and ultimately, even losing to QPR won't matter at all, really, in terms of the play. And if the playoffs are won, then everyone will say, "God, remember that losing 5 in a row, or 4 or 5 in a row, and then winning at Wembley," and then that'll all be forgotten. I do slightly worry that a run like this, even if you're not in the team, if you're being rested, it's not great. It's just not great for fans' morale, apart from anything. And there have been times over the last few weeks where it's been really quiet at the stadium because the fans need the players to give them a bit of a lift, and it's not been happening. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried. But then again, and when you look at the league table, it's for a long time it was top two's in reach. 23 points behind Leeds and Burnley. When did that happen?
It's crazy.
And 13 behind Sheffield United. And yet, look how far they are ahead of 7th place. I think they're going to finish at least 7 points clear in the playoff zone, and with at least 76 points. I did a thing for a friend of mine was doing a trailer for Sky about Sunderland before the season, and interviewed a few fans and journalists and things, and said, right, in one word, everyone at the end of it, he said, one word, sum up your hopes for the coming season. And I said, survival. Based on last year, and having watched Sunderland for a long time and always being a pessimist, and having this guy in charge that nobody ever heard of. I remember the first home game, I was sitting with Simon O'Rourke from Tyne Tees, and he said, this guy, he's going to be one of those coaches who, in a few years' time, you're either going to say, Régis Lebris, remember him? Oh, super. Or you'll say, do you remember that French guy we had for about 2 months? Who was that? And at the moment, it's looking good. On paper, you've got to say, what an incredible turnaround and what a job he's done. But the last playoffs, I tell this story often when talking about Tony Mowbray. I was down at Luton doing the Vox Pops, interviewing fans after the game. And usually they are the worst ones to do. Football fans, when they've lost, not just lost a game, but lost a really, like a cup final or a playoff or something like that. And without fail, every Sunderland fan that I interviewed that night as they came out to Kenilworth Road said, We lost, but hey, you know what? It's been a fantastic season. Absolutely loved it. Never thought we'd get this far, and it's just been great. The football's been fantastic, and it's a shame, but we only had half a team, and we'll be back. I just think this time there's more expectation, and they won't be quite as forgiving. I think when the team's been up there all season and been top of the league for a long stretch at the start of the season, there's more expectation, and yeah, I'm glad I'm not doing the box props this time. Put it that way.
It is interesting, isn't it, that question of expectation, because that's been built really by the players' good performance earlier on in the season, and historically Sunderland in the Championship, when we get a sniff of competing at the top end, we tend to do quite well. So there's that sort of inbuilt mentality within the fan base, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think, from early season, a lot of fans will think, oh, God, this is it. This is the year.
This could be the time.
Back in the Premier League, even if, you try not to look at it in the cold, hard light of day. Last 2 seasons, the 3 teams have gone up and come straight back down, and there's every likelihood that will happen again. But then again, who'd have thought Bournemouth would ever establish themselves as a Brentford?
Even Brighton and Brentford now, I'm still surprised to see them there sometimes.
Yeah. Not Forest, who looked, every year looked like they were just going to drop. Who knows? Got to be in it to win it.
How have you found Regis? Because it's interesting you mentioned that conversation you had with Simon O'Rourke, because the paper lads did pre-season. We were down in Bradford twice, and then there's South Shields, Gateshead, and one of the games at Bradford, I think we lost to Bradford, didn't we? 2 or 3-1. And you can't really take much from pre-season, as you know. It's team building exercise and whatnot. But Lebris hadn't been in the job long, and we spoke to him pitch side, and he was giving nothing away. He was cagey. I wouldn't go as far as being defensive, but just weren't getting a lot from him. And I remember thinking in the car home, I was like, "This could be
a long season.
Could be a really, really long season." And because he's very calm and mild mannered, isn't he? Which I think is a great strength of his. But at the time, I was like, I think he could get gobbled up and spat out here. But he's proved me.
It'll be interesting to know from the players if he ever loses his temper, because I've never seen even a flicker of it. I really like him I
do, yeah. He's warmed up.
As a coach, I don't know. I don't know how much he puts into it and how much it is. But as a guy and as an organizer and just as a human being, I find him a really, really nice guy. He works really hard on his English. He speaks really, very decent English, considering I don't think he's been learning it for that long. I did a Q&A for the Ex-Players Association at Christmas, which I always do every year at their Christmas dinner at the stadium. And he came in and said he would do half an hour. And I'd only ever interviewed him, across the table or whatever. So I said, can I just have a word with him beforehand? Just to see what I can and can't ask, and just to really introduce myself properly. And I said, Regis, Jeff Brown covered it area for 40 years and all that sort of thing. And he was really interested. And I said, look, first question's got to be, how do you pronounce your name properly? And he says, Regis Lebris. That's definitely Lebris. Right, great. Just so I know. So we went on the stage, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sunderland head coach. And I said, of course, first question's got to be, Regis, how do you pronounce your name? And he looked at me and said, you've been forgotten already. Which was good, which was fun. He meant it as a joke. And it was he's just a decent bloke. He's an affable bloke. Whether he'll end up as a club legend, I suppose, much depends on the next couple of weeks, really.
It does.
But I would hope that he will still be around. Certainly, if promotion doesn't happen, it'd be interesting to see how it all pans out.
And I'm interested, Jeff, just lastly before we head off, how does this season feel to you? Because you've covered a lot of Sunderland over the years, but also a lot of Newcastle and Middlesbrough. As we mentioned with the playoff permutations, it's a bit of a bizarre season, really, in a sense that Sunderland have been in limbo for a little while. But I do feel like sometimes in a playoff campaign, you can just sort of smell it and get a sense of what's going to happen. You get a gut feeling. What's yours about this season? putting you on the spot. I'm definitely putting you on the spot.
I know. I do worry that really it's a team that's, even with all the first choice players in, isn't scoring goals at the moment. I think that might be a downfall. The worry would be that whoever they get in the first leg, if like the Lincoln one, do you remember the Lincoln playoff?
Oh yeah, that was horrible.
If they come back chasing a 2-goal deficit, are there enough goals in that team?
And notoriously this team starts slow away from home.
Absolutely, and you know that whoever they get in that first game, in the first 20 minutes of the home leg, they are really going to be up for it. It's I'd almost prefer that the home game was first, to be honest. I know
I've had that thought myself, because a lot's been made of having the home leg second, but I mean, I think it probably, if you did the averages over the years, it probably does balance out that way, but it's not something that really keeps me awake at night. That
no, I know. It's Middlesbrough have been a funny one. At times they've looked like world beaters, and then other times, remember when they had that stretch from scoring about 15 goals in 3 games, and and of course Newcastle, it has just been quite a big story,
Yeah, absolutely.
The old so I'm sure a lot of Sunderland fans looking on enviously thinking, it'd be nice to get to Trafalgar Square this year.
Yeah, well, I think that's my hope for this season, really. Like, getting beat in the playoff final, it's a bit of a lottery, but I would just love to have that trip to Wembley again. And because I think the day before the game's almost the best bit, isn't it, really, of Wembley? I mean, Wickham was absolutely class, but just sort of seeing your friends beforehand and stuff, I think that's what really makes it, isn't it? So I really, really hope we can have that experience again.
Yeah. Well, we shall find out very soon.
We shall see. We'll try and reconvene maybe as Jeff after the season's finished and do this again. But thank you for joining me. Please tell us again the name of the play, where you can find it just once more.
It's The Bench, and it's coming to a theatre and some village halls and all sorts of things near you. Carol W Productions is where you'll find the whole tour plan and the various ticket websites, and it all kicks off at the Gala Theatre in Durham, 22nd of May, and I'll be at most of them. So if you want to come and say hello and to that bloke who used to be on the telly, then I'll more than likely be there.
Fantastic. And Jeff's across socials as well. I think you're on X and everything else like the rest of us. But thanks again for joining us, mate. I really appreciate it. You can head over to the Sunderland Echo website for all of your latest content ahead of the QPR game, and we'll keep you up to date with the playoffs as well. Thank you once again for joining us.